I brought my notes. I tried making notes, and this is so this is my inspiration for the talk. By Baba's grace, I was born into a Baba family. And so we led a life, and are still leading a life, of spiritual companionship, which has been a wonderful thing for me and for all of us in our family. And it continues to our children. So we grew up in this Baba atmosphere, although my parents never pushed Baba on us. In fact, when they had meetings, we were sent to bed. And there weren't all these lovely Baba songs that you have now. They were just the Christian hymns. And so I recall wishing to be out there attending the meeting, and from my bed listening to all these songs. And I think that made me more curious and more interested in Baba. And my parents would go down to New York City when Narina would give a talk. And one time they took us down, we children, and I was around 8 years old. And it was through Narina that I realized that it was Baba who would be my whole life. That I made that conscious decision then. And since then, I just simply had to know all the answers and sought all the answers in Baba. And through the years, we children would say, when are we going to meet Baba? And my parents and others would say, well, soon. And soon turned out to be stretched out year after year. And in the meantime, Baba did write a few letters to us, and that was very encouraging. So these little tidbits would come along to just stretch out the time. So it wasn't until 1952 that we three met Baba. And for Renee and me, it was May 10th. And of course, that was the day that changed our whole lives. And before meeting Baba, I was very nervous, and I was having an anxiety attack because I had built up a lot of fears about what it would be like to meet Baba, because I felt very inadequate, very incapable, and next to my parents, I thought, well, I won't even love Baba. I had all these fears about my own inadequacies. And so we were in Myrtle Beach, and Baba was in the lagoon cabin giving interviews. It was in the morning, and we walked up that little path, and I ducked behind my mother. And so she went first, and Baba stood and wrapped his arms around her, and then he embraced me. And with that, I knew I had come home. And all my thoughts and all my fears just simply faded away. They were non-existent. And I just came into Baba's love. And with Baba, then the rest of the family greeted Baba, and he just showed us in like the host. And we sat there with him. And the sweetness and the fragrance of his being just permeated all of us. And I won't say that our minds were blown away, but the mind ceased to be in control. It just was left aside, let it rest, and we were functioning from a different level, from what level I was not conscious. In the first meetings with Baba, I was not totally conscious, because with Baba there's so much to be conscious of that there's no way you can assimilate what Baba's giving you all at once. And it's just years and years and years, all these years, the assimilation is still going on, and I'm still finding out what it is to meet Baba, what it is, who Baba is, what it is to have Baba in my life. So some of the things that I will be saying are things that they're mixed from the beginning through all these years. You see what I mean? It's a continuous experience. There's no stopping and starting point. It's just a circle. And so as we sat there and being with Baba, Baba knew how to make us feel at home and at ease, because all at once you see his greatness and his awesomeness and all the superlatives, but he's sitting there in such childlike sweet innocence, like that, like it's just okay. And so we felt this naturalness with Baba, 100% naturalness. And Baba's a challenge too, because you must be honest with him. And when you're with Baba, you see that he knows everything about you, through and through. And all the things from your past and past lives, all that residue, you see all of that, and you know he knows, and he loves you in spite of all that. It doesn't mar his love for you. You know that he has forgiven you, he accepts you, and because of that, you can accept yourself totally. He gives you an identity, because it turns out to be a different identity. In looking into Baba's eyes, there is so much. You are seeing that he is recognizing himself in you. And you look into his eyes and you recognize that self and all of what you thought was yourself in him. So it goes back and forth, this recognition. And when you see his recognition of himself in you, you have to admit not only that he is in you, but that highest, all that is of the highest and beautiful and noble, and all that is truth, that it is in you. And even though you know that you aren't outwardly manifesting that or portraying it, it automatically puts you into a position of saying, gee, I wish I really could be that way. Because he gives you the vision of who you really are. And it's staggering, because it's difficult to accept. But with it comes this flood of love, and that everything is okay. And when you see this image of who Baba is and that he is in you, it presents to you a longing to strive to be that. And this longing builds up in you. And it builds up to an energy. It builds up such an energy that it will sweep away everything that stands in its way between you and Baba. And this longing to love Baba and to be what Baba wants you to be becomes a mighty force. It becomes the sword and the strength to wield it against all your weaknesses and all that stands in the way of you and Baba. And then you start your spiritual work, and it's not actually you doing it. It's Baba doing it within you to free himself within you. And Baba's there, innocent of it all. And here we are when we're with Baba. I was working like the dickens, because it's all new territory for me, to see what I can do. What can I do to... And we became greedy for Baba's love. We would fill us up to the brim, and it seemed like, my cup's so small. What do I do now? And so you find out that, well, chuck it out. Get rid of everything. You don't have time to put a label. Well, this is bad and that's bad, and I'll get rid of this and I'll give Baba that. You just get rid of everything, all your good as well as all of your bad, and you're not thinking about it. It's an action that just takes place, and with that you are making room for Baba's love. And Baba said, it is up to you to draw as much as you can. So that when the ocean of love is sitting before you and mingling with you and patting you on the back and walking with you and showing you his attention, and you can't help but want to draw from that ocean because he's giving it freely, and you know that the only barrier is your own self. And so why not? You do everything without thinking. When the interview was over, Baba stood up and embraced us again. And his body had the strength and yet the softness of petals of gardenias. There's just no way to describe Baba's physical form. And his eyes seem bigger than life itself. I mean, you can use the terms of all the flowers there are to describe Baba and his beauty. And his eyes were like the big brown daisies and like the flashing lightning. He was so dynamic. There's absolutely no picture that can even come close to capturing what he was like. So after our interview, we went back, and I really don't remember what we did after that. Nothing else seemed to exist. But then we didn't have another interview until not the following day, but the day after that. And we were staying at a hotel in town. And I remember sweeping the floor. And it's a curious thing to sweep the floor. But while I was doing that, I was reverting to my usual self, and I was aware that my mind was just going about its trite trivia. and I realized, hey, I'm not thinking of Baba. You know, I wasn't so overwhelmed with Baba that my mind couldn't go clickety-clack. And I had to pause because I realized this is a moment of decision. I could just ignore Baba and go about being the kind of person I usually am and letting my mind take over. And that was when I realized that my mind is not the boss. And to put it aside and not to let this trivia just rule me, and to let the mind become the servant. We didn't go around mindless. The mind becomes the servant, and it's in its place, and to strike that balance between the mind and the heart. So then we had more interviews with Baba, and that same sweetness, and that same gentleness, and that same strength. Baba said he's like butter and like steel. And when we were with him, it's like the king who welcomed to his kingdom. And it pleased him to show us around and to come fly with him. And the journey he took us on was into his realms and to show us his treasures of his glory and of his life, and of life at its best, the kind of life that we are meant to live. Baba is very convincing. He convinces us that it is our right, and what we are meant to do is to live that kind of life, of being in his being, totally, and 100% all the time. We sometimes put categories or limitations on Baba. Well, Baba's all right here, and he's all right there. But Baba was impressing on us that this is it. This is really life, and this is what we're meant to be. But he didn't overwhelm us in the sense that we couldn't feel aware of what was happening. In fact, we used to talk among ourselves and say, we're the kind of people, suddenly we're the kind of people we always wanted to be. And with no effort. We weren't trying to be good. We weren't trying to, it just happened. And we were treating each other nicely. And everything just sort of went that way. And we just loved everybody. We didn't have to think or qualify anybody. It was unconditional. Baba loved us unconditionally, and he wanted us to love unconditionally. The other thing was, we discovered that in Baba's love, he would give so much, and it was up to us to receive. But that's only half of the story. The other half of the story is to give. And there were times when our family was alone with Baba. In New York, one time, there were a number of people, and all of a sudden, just the five of us were left. And Baba said, come here. And we sat on the floor around Baba. And we were just sitting there, and no conversation was taking place. And it was as though we were all united, and there was this flow. Baba was giving, just letting it just pour on us. And it was just going back to Baba. And it became a rhythm. And then became a breathing. And actually a breathing rhythm. And Baba was showing us that that's what it's meant to be. A give and a take. And then you don't know where the beginning is, the giving or the taking. And it's just this constantly being absorbed in Baba. So in 1952, there were not as many times for being with Baba as in the other years, but that was to get us more accustomed to being with him. And he treated us in the West almost like children, and he was our daddy. And we followed him around and wanted to be as close as we could, and listened to everything he said, and he would play games and toss fruit. And in New York, after the accident, there were interviews, and he would invite the whole group of people around who were still on the premises into the room, and he'd just play games and look at you and toss the fruit over there. And he'd just have everybody just laughing the whole time. And you just forget yourself. And Baba had us laughing so many times and he showed his humor in so many ways, so that it lightened up some of the seriousness of being with him. And one time in New York, at Mrs. Deuce's apartment, Baba had the people there. He came out from his interview room and was sitting there, and I thought, well, this wonderful opportunity, I should be loving Baba. And I thought, well, I'm not. And love isn't something you can conjure up. You cannot manufacture it. You can't just make it up. And I said, well, I'm not loving Baba. I'm adoring Baba. I've never adored anybody or anything. And here I was adoring Baba. And all of a sudden Baba says, I am adorable. He just picks up on all your thoughts and every little thing. And the Shaw family was stationed in the Mrs. Deuce's apartment for every day while Baba was giving interviews. And we all had different posts, different duties. And I don't remember what Renee was supposed to do or what the others of our family were supposed to do. But I was upstairs, and I was supposed to answer the telephone. And I think every time the telephone rang, somebody else came in the room and answered it. So I began to suspect that maybe there's something else going on. And afterwards I realized I was put in that room so that I would have a quiet place to do the work that Baba was going to do. I was 18, and I was concerned with making my way in the world, and concerned with making the adjustments with going out in the job market and how to handle everything and how to cope with spiritual life and so-called material life. And what happened was that my whole value system was being reconstructed. Every single thing was being torn down and done away with, and building anew of premises to work on, to how to function in the world, and how to put the spiritual life together with just plain everyday living. And it was really very, very difficult work because I'd never done anything like that before. And then afterwards, after it was all done, I heaved a sigh of relief, going through all these mazes, and it gets hairy and it gets complicated because you have to face yourself, your inner self, and be honest and know what is real and what isn't real. And do away with the falseness, or at least some measure of the falseness. So when that was all done, it was at the close of the day, Baba called us all into the room, and he started telling stories, a story of King Janak. And while he was doing that, he was always doing so many things at once. You were aware that his hands were working and his eyes were flashing, and you just didn't know how much he was doing at once. But during this talk and the story, he just holds his hand up like that with the thumb and the finger, like that, and his eyes smiling and bright. And with that flashed to me, oh yes, it was Baba who was doing all that work upstairs. It wasn't me at all. I thought I was doing all that hard work. And he was the one who was leading me around to figure out all of these things. And then I began to realize later, well, it was actually later in my life that it was because of that experience that Baba was telling me then and later that he was the one who was working throughout my life afterwards, through all the problems, through every day, through the constant restructuring that goes on when you follow Baba. It's not just one structure and that's it. It's a constant restructuring, a constant revising. Well, Baba sets the standard of truth. And then it's up to us to live that truth and make it manifest in our life. We may not do it right, but we try. And Baba was telling me that he was there working it out with me. And that trying is what we do. And he works out the rest with us. Another time was in Mrs. Deuce's apartment when Baba called Renee and me into the room, and he showed us this great big bowl of fruit. And he asked us if we would make this fruit salad for him. And we said, yes, Baba. And then he called me over. Well, he called me actually over to this side, and he was using the alphabet board, and he holds it up to me, and he starts pointing very slowly. Now, normally, Baba, you've seen in movies how quickly he points to the board. You just feel like it's so impossible to follow how quickly he points to the board. And he went, and he pointed, and then after he was finished, he looks up, and by that time I had figured out, well, that's 4 letters. And that's all I'd figured out. And I thought, I really felt dumb. And then so he didn't face him a bit. He goes, and he goes, and again. And so by that time I had gotten to S-O. And he looks up like, and I said, oh, I still didn't figure it out. And so he just goes on again. And he goes, and he said, S-O-F-T. And I said, oh, soft. And he just, and he just doesn't make you feel stupid. When you know you are, you know. He gives you your dignity and saves your face in the face of all of that. And he looked pleased, you know, like he actually looked like, how smart you are, you got it. And so he meant for us to make the fruit salad soft. And Renee says like this, to mush it. And now we brought it into the kitchen, in Mrs. Deuce's small kitchen. And there were the cooks there, and it was a very, very hot day. And I, for one, was completely oblivious of the heat. I just didn't know it was hot. And these cooks, I don't know what they thought of us. Here the two of us are over this bowl, and we're weeping because we were so thrilled at having the chance to do something for Baba. And Renee would say, softer, Leatrice, softer. And so it was some cherries, apricots, peaches, grapefruit, and oranges. Did I leave anything out? Just almost everything you could think of. And we peeled them and we just really mashed it all up. And I kept on thinking, how would anybody like that mushy mash? But Renee said that she heard later that that's what Baba liked. You see, this was after the accident, and he didn't have his teeth. And his gums were so sore and sensitive, that was all he could eat. And Baba was in that room, enduring so much suffering with his leg up in the cast. And there was no air conditioning in that room. And they had this big block of ice and the big fans to cool it off in the room. And he was not closed down to the waist, so he'd be cooler. And Renee and others saw people go in, and they come out bawling, just crying. There was so much love, so much that Baba was giving out. And then there was another time when Baba called my mother in, and the three of us, and he gave her a whole pile of these green grapes. And he said, now go out here into the room and feed. Did he say exactly where to sit? Right there. And so we had to sit out in this room where all these people were waiting for their interviews. And my mother had to feed us those grapes. So it was significant for whatever that was. So there were scenes like that a lot of things we never knew the significance of, but they were there. Later on, in the 50s, well, first of all, I want to remember, in 1952, there was an open house day when the public came. And we were on the back porch, actually, at Myrtle Beach, at the barn. And my mother was asked to be at the back door. See, people would come through the barn, through the front door, and come up to where Baba was seated in the center of the barn. And then they would be directed out toward the back door. And my mother was at the back to guide people down the stairs and make sure they stayed on the paths, because some people were just so taken with Baba that they just simply couldn't negotiate the stairs or know that a path was there. And so Renee and I went there too, because it's too hard to resist taking a look in at Baba and just absorbing some of those love waves that just go out all over the place. And I wanted to say that when there was a group of black people who came, and Baba stood for them, which was quite different from the other people. And he greeted them all with open arms. And Elizabeth said that she wondered why Baba was so quick with people. He'd just have them come and go. And Baba said that that was so their minds wouldn't have a chance to work, and that they could receive what he wanted to give them. Now, another point was in 1956, when we were traveling with Baba, we were in airports, and this was one scene in the Wilmington airport in North Carolina. Baba made a point of using the men's restroom, and people were aghast when they saw him going into the black restrooms. They say, Baba, Baba, you're going quickly, and just give a quick toss like that throughout. And I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to catch the candy. And he knew that that's how I felt. And he just reached over and gave it to me like that. I mean, he's just every little thing. Nothing escapes his attention. You know that he knows you in and out in every way. So there was a time, too, in 1958, Baba was having, every morning he said he'd be out at the Myrtle Beach and go to the barn at 9 o'clock. But before that, things were happening over at Baba's house. And Billy Eaton and Al Winterfeld and I were asked to do the light picking up around the house before 9 o'clock. So we would hurry up and get ready in the morning, and my father would come over and give us a ride over there. And we would go in and dust the living room and just straighten it out. And we would move quickly from room to room. And Baba didn't really pay attention to us in the sense that he would say anything and acknowledge that we were there. He would just go about his business, and we'd usually just pass him in the hallway, or we would work in the room that he was not in. And it was just so heavenly being a part of Baba's household. We were just so happy being there. And we would go into Baba's bedroom together and share making Baba's bed, and we changed sides, one on each side and one on the foot, and we changed sides each day making Baba's bed and changing the linen and everything. And then we would do everything very quickly. And as Renee will tell you, I wasn't too swift about housework. and then the reason we did it so quickly is because we wanted to, with the time left over, we could go back into the living room and sit on the floor and be with Baba. And he would be talking to the Mandalay and telling plans of the day and so on, and we could be with him. Then he would go out the front door of the house and get in the car to go to the barn. And while he was doing that, we would go out the kitchen door and stand there and wave him off. So this one day, we did all of our work, and the girls went into the living room. And as I was on my way to the living room, I passed the doorway to Dr. Duncan's bedroom. Now, Dr. Duncan was doing night duty, and so normally his door was closed. He was sleeping. And we never did his room. We just didn't think about it because the door was closed. So this morning I looked in there, and wow, the room needed a little attention. And they weren't there, and I thought, oh, gosh, I want to be out there, and this is my duty, this is what I'm supposed to be here. And this moment of decision, this crisis, really, of what to do. You know, your heart says, oh, I'm going to just pretend I didn't notice and just go out there and forget it and be with Baba. And with Baba, you have to be honest. And so I went in the room, and I did all that I had to do, and I was looking through the doorway, through the closed door, and I was thinking, well, Baba, you know I'm here. You set me up for this. And so that's it. That's what you want, and that's the way it is. I'll do what I have to do, and I did that quickly. And by the time I finished that, the living room scene was all cleared out, and Baba was heading for the car. So I raced out the back door and stood with them to wave at Baba. I thought, well, at least I get to wave to Baba. And Baba looks, he's already in the car, and he looks over at me, and he has this way of opening his eyes like that, and he opens and he points to me, and he says, he goes like this, and he comes over. And I came over to the car, and he leans out like this, and he just patted my face with this caress, and it more than made up for. So somehow I managed to get back to the barn. Then one morning, it was the next to the last morning, when Baba, here again in Baba's house, Baba said, well, tomorrow is a free day, and I might go to the beach, and I might do this, and I might do that. And so Baba has a way of, when he talks and says things casually, you know when it's right for you to hear. It's like he's not, usually he's not looking at you when he's talking to the others, as though he's talking to meaningfully for them, but it's really meaningfully for you. So he says, I might go to the beach, and I start boing, boing, boing. And it just really registered. And then he says, it's very important to be physically close to me, as close as possible. Well, it's not as though we didn't know that. But before, with all the crowds of people, we were more or less semi-polite to each other. We didn't just really barge our way around to get next to Baba. And if we didn't wind up being at the front of the line or right next to us, we took it and just said, okay, this is where I am. But when I heard Baba say that, it just hit me so hard that I felt there's only one day left. I'm going to make a point of being as close to Baba as I can. I just felt that he was saying that for me. And so that morning, that following morning, we did go to the beach. And because I knew we were going to the beach, I wore a sundress with a little white jacket, little cotton jacket. And we all went to the beach, and Baba came in the car. And now you may have heard of Charles PIlgrim. He wrote the God, Man, and the Perfect Master. There was an incident just on the dune side, the land side of the beach, not the ocean side, with a car. I think he was trying to open the door and to help Baba out or something. I'm not clear about that. But anyway, he smashed a finger in the car door. And Baba was so solicitous over him and to make sure everything was all right. And they sent back to the main part of the center for ice for him. And then Baba said, see how fortunate you are? Because of this, because of Charles, you get to have more time with me. And that's not all there is to that incident. Because the thing that flashes in my mind is that even when something, quote, not so good happens, Baba was pointing out the bright side of it. He's always pointing out the good thing. And he was giving us all these things, these clues to last us this lifetime, next lifetime, etc. These clues, he was always, and it was for us to see them. And while we couldn't see them on the spot, it just now occurred to me just this moment, that was the clue, to look on the bright side. So these things are just still coming to us, Baba's clues. So then we finally did get over to the ocean side and onto the beach. And Baba was being carried in the chair. Meanwhile, I had taken off my shoes and my little jacket, and there on the beach there was this little indentation of the beach part, and there was a big puddle of water. And a lot of people weren't prepared for that, and we went right straight across through that puddle of water, and people just walked through with their shoes on. I mean, who's going to stop now? Well, that was only the beginning. And here I am, shoulder to shoulder with Baba. See, he was being carried by the ballet dancers, but I was really right behind, or right where his shoulder was. And it seemed, time is a strange thing with Baba. You can't gauge how fast you're going and how much time something took. And it seemed like the momentum picked up, and we were just very swiftly charging right into the ocean. And didn't bother me a bit. I was going to go wherever it was going to. It never occurred to me, when are we going to stop? And how come he's going to the ocean? Nothing. I was just all I cared about was being next to Baba. And there we go. We're going. We went up to our knees. And I saw Erich over there. He looked, his shoes on and everything. And a whole flock of people, they all went in, shoes on and everything. And so, as it turned out, Baba was in the chair, and he had him go in far enough so that his feet could be in the water. And so as soon as that was accomplished, he had them turn around and come right back up onto a high spot on the beach. And they set the chair down, and I was still next to Baba's shoulder. And I thought, there ought to be a towel to wipe his feet with. Well, there's no towel. Aha, I've got my jacket here. And there was all this crowd of people. And I couldn't get down there, so I just gently dropped it down. And somebody else took it and dried his feet with it. And then they passed it back up. And Baba set me up for that. And he just gives you these little gifts that remind you of him. And then I was so taken with it and by such surprise that I had this, that I just stood there. And Baba doesn't wait for anything. You don't stop and wallow in anything. You have time to savor anything. He's up and running again. So here they were, up, and there he was going. Then I realized, he's up there, and I lost my place. And so I ran after him. And by the time I caught up with him, he was heading back toward the land part, and the chair he was put down in the chair, and Baba said, now it's time for the ladies to have a chance to carry Baba in the chair. And I tell you, that was the funniest thing, because everybody wanted a finger on the chair, and there's nothing organized about it. I mean, the ballet dancers are just so in tune and balanced and had it down pat. And here's all these ladies, they're all getting in, crowding in around the chair, and an arm here and an arm there. And Baba was... and it really looked like he might topple over any minute. And, he didn't let him carry him very far. and so... But at least I got my finger on there, too. And so it all had its significance. And so maybe that was the part of the beginning of women's liberation, I don't know. So Baba's always up to his tricks, and you had to be pretty quick to follow and not miss a single thing. And in fact, when he was walking, I thought when Narina would describe how quickly he walked, I would think, oh, that's pushing it. I could keep up with Baba. And I found out you really have to practically run to keep up with Baba. He was like he was gliding, as though he were walking in slow motion, and yet you couldn't keep up with him. That's how fast he was going. Now I'll consult my notes again. In 1958, after the men's program, Baba said, I hear that the men are going to give a program, a show. And they all said, we are? And so they all gave this men's show, and only the men were the actors. Now, a few women had a part in scenery and costuming and things like that, but the men got up the whole skit and the whole thing, and we all came to watch the show. And Baba said he almost broke his silence. He was laughing so hard. We saw him. He was just, and we all said we never laughed so hard in our lives. There's just incomparable. Nothing was so funny. But then after the show, they had this impromptu band up there, and they have been playing songs. And the last song they played was "Begin the Begin," and that set Baba into this mood of working within. And Baba allowed us to observe his working within. And he did say that many things would be said about the Sahavas in 1958. And just a minute. He said his suffering was begotten of compassion and love for mankind, and that this Sahavas will be unique in the sense that you will all witness and share my present universal suffering by being near me and as my fortunate companions, being with the Ancient One who will be completely on the human level with you. So while we had the lightheartedness and the laughter, Baba was suffering all this time. And we were his companions in this suffering. And while I was just to depart from this story, while I was at Baba's house one morning, and I just passed him in the hall, I saw that suffering on his face. You just have no idea. It's totally beyond our capacity to know what that suffering is. And he came to suffer. And he went about, that was his business, and he went about his business, and we were his companions. So at this moment, when the Begin was being played, he went into this mood, and we all recognized it and became still, and were just allowed to share these moments with him. And he stayed outside the barn. They brought him outside the barn and set the chair down. And he stayed there for a long time. And we gathered around. And then he was taken over to the main part of the center. And he was, again, sitting in front of the lagoon cabin. And we all gathered around, not close. We actually were across the little roadway at a good distance. And I was behind some people. And I actually couldn't see Baba all the time. And I had to get up on my tippy toes to get a glimpse once in a while. And even the crickets and the birds and all of nature became still. they were participating. And not a thought was in my mind. I wasn't really thinking anything. And just as I was taking one of those peeks at Baba, he was like this, and he just looked at me like that. And his eyes were so big and close. And when he looked at me, it gave me this shock of who Baba is. And it's really beyond words. And I was in a daze. And after that scene was over, I went to my room and I just sat there, reverberating in this shock, this daze. And then the words that I could put onto it were that whoever God is, whoever Baba is, whatever all of that is, I don't know. But this being before me, whatever God is, he's it. This is God. Before that, I accepted Baba as God up here. In my mind, I accepted, of course, Baba's God. I accepted Baba as God as a child. But this was quite different. It was really a total shock to my being. Oh my gosh, this is God. And still not knowing what God is. But this was God. And then there was the call for lunch, and I really preferred staying in my room, but I didn't want to call attention to what was happening, and so I just went to lunch and went through the paces. I never remembered what I ate with Baba, except the birthday cake. Otherwise, food and all things just seemed to disappear in the big ocean of Baba. What time is it now? 10:15. So there were many experiences and many times and many incidences of Baba showing us who he is and what he is, and showing us how to cope with him. And I think we must have to spend many lifetimes learning how to have courage and how to be daring, because being with Baba requires being daring. If we would honestly recognize who he is and want to live the truth, the life of the truth that he gives us, he gives it to us freely and openly, then we have to exercise that daring to want to be what he wants us to be. To try. And the biggest part of that is giving everything to him. And when Baba in 1956 said, "Give everything to me," I thought, I can't do that. I was at least honest. I said, I can give him a lot of things, but every single thing, no. It's going to be a long time before I can really do that. That's something that's going to take a lot of work. So even though I could accept that Baba said that, I realized that I was far short of it, far short. Because it's right down on the line. Everything means everything. But Baba invites us into his flame of love. And Baba is the Duni. And all of our desires, all of our loves, and all of our losses, we toss them in the flame. And we fan that fire by getting rid of ourselves. And Baba wants us to be true to the trust he reposes in us. Jai Baba. chained until you let me go. Yeah, are there any questions? What time is it? Oh, all right, if there are questions, all right.
Do you have any special advice for children, say, when they anything to say about, children have, I think, just as many things to go through as all of us do.
Yes, they have. They have more these days, far more than we ever had. They have so much to contend with. To look at Baba's picture, to look into his eyes, and to listen to Baba, and to be honest.
Did Baba come to your home in Schenectady?
Not in the physical form.
Would you mind elaborating?
What?
Would you mind telling us about it?
Elaborating? Well, no, we felt Baba's presence in our home very much. And my father had wanted to have a center for Baba, and Baba said, your heart is the center of Baba. I am in all hearts who are of my lovers, and that is the center, that is the only center. Any others? Okay. All right, thank you. Oh, one more?
Well, sort of have desperate times where even when after you were with Baba, not specifically for you to tell us, but did you go through times when you felt that life was hopeless or that it was
Many.
more than you could deal with?
Many. Baba doesn't save you from what you have to go through, but he holds you through all of it, and he guides you through it all. He didn't save me from a lot of things, and there were desperate times. And I thank him for the desperate times, because that it takes that desperateness, because we're such tough nuts, to be able to let go. He takes you to the brink of what you can endure, or what you can do or not do, until you finally are up against the wall and you say, all right, I give up. And then when you give up, if only you could have done it in the first place. When you finally give up in utter desperation, then he takes care and he takes hold, and you have passed one more of your limitations. You've grown bigger, and you've grown closer to Baba, and you learn to trust him in the first place. He wants to save us from all of this, if we would only have it. Okay. Jai Baba.